We have office assistants Brooke and Sophia here to tell us about powers of I. So we learned that I is the square root of -1. So then we want to know, well, what happens when we have I raised to a power? So for instance, I squared. So that means that to have I squared, I need to take I and I multiply it by itself 2 times. I know that I is the square root of -1, so I have square root -1 times square root -1. Anytime I am multiplying 2 square roots together, I can put them both inside the same square root. And so these 2 things are going to be multiplied together. That cancels out the square root symbols. We're just left with -1. So therefore, I squared is just -1. Then what if we have I cubed? Well, I cubed is another way of saying I squared times I. And we just learned that I squared is -1. So this is really like saying -1 times I, which means I can just write that as -I. Continuing, what about if we have I to the 4th? Well, I know that I to the 4th is I squared times I squared. And we learned that I squared is -1. So that's -1 times -1. A negative times a negative is a positive, and 1 times 1 is 1, so that just gives us 1. So therefore, we can summarize the first 4 powers of I as square root -1, -1, -I, and 1. We can take this further though. What if it's I to the 5th power, I to the 6th, I to the 7th, and so on? What we want to keep in mind is that I to the 5th is the same thing as I to the 4th times I. And we've discovered that I to the 4th is 1. So this is really like saying 1 times I, and anything times 1 is just itself. So that's just I. And we know that I is square root -1. I to the 6th, that's I to the 4th times I squared. And again, we know I to the 4th is 1. So that's like saying 1 times I squared, which is then just I squared. And this is going to continue. I to the 7th is I to the 4th times I cubed. I to the 4th is 1. That's 1 times I cubed, which is just I cubed. And I to the 8th is I to the 4th times I to the 4th. We know I to the 4th is 1. And then you should be noticing that we have this pattern here. Because I to the 4th is just 1, what we can do, despite what our power is take out all the I to the 4ths that our number has. And then what we end up getting is really just a repeat of I to the 1st, I to the 2nd, I to the 3rd, I to the 4th. So when we're working with powers of I, we want to divide our exponent by 4 and determine what its remainder is. Does it have a remainder of 1? This is I to the 1st, a remainder of 2, a remainder of 3, or is it just a multiple of 4? With that being said, we are now going to take that information and we are going to simplify some powers of I. So if I have -I raised to the 143rd power, I want to take that power and I want to divide it by 4. 143 divided by 4 is going to give me 35. It's going to have a remainder of 3. So that means I can rewrite this as -I cubed. I bring down my negative and my I, and all I care about is what my remainder is. Since it had a remainder of 3, this is the same thing as -I cubed. I know that I cubed is -I, but this -I, this I cubed, is being negated. So I have a negative I, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So this simplifies down just to I. Same concept over here, but now we have a fraction. Anytime we have a fraction, the first thing we always have to do is simplify that fraction. 36 divided by 4 is going to give me 9. I to the 5th over I cubed, I just subtract my exponents. That's going to leave me with I squared. So I have 9I squared. I know that I squared is the same thing as -1. 9 times -1 is -9.